My mom called me on a Tuesday. Normal time. Normal number. I picked up smiling. She said 7 words. You can't come to the house anymore. No fight had happened. No argument the week before. No missed birthday, no forgotten call. Nothing. I had spoken to her 3 days earlier and she had laughed at something I said about my coffee maker. And now this. I asked her why. She paused for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "It's better this way." And she hung up. I called back 4 times. Straight to voicemail. I called my dad. He picked up on the first ring, which meant he was waiting. Which meant he knew she was going to call me. Which meant this was planned. He said, "Your mother already spoke to you." And then he hung up too. I sat in my car for 20 minutes. Not crying. Just sitting. Trying to locate the moment I had done something wrong. I couldn't find it. That was 8 weeks ago. What I found out after those 8 weeks, I am still not sure I have fully processed it. Because the reason they kept me away from that house had nothing to do with me being unwanted. It was so much worse than that. And so much more complicated. Stay with me. Because this story does not go where you think it goes. Not even close. I have a very specific memory of the last normal conversation I had with my mother. It was a Thursday. She called me while I was making dinner. She talked about a television show she had started watching. She complained about the neighbor's dog. She asked if I was eating enough. I said yes. She said I didn't sound like it. We laughed. I told her I loved her. She said it back. The call lasted 11 minutes. 3 days later she told me I wasn't welcome at their house anymore. No warning. No argument. No history of tension leading up to it. Just a Tuesday afternoon phone call that started normally and then fell off a cliff. The exact words were, "We think it's better if you don't come by for a while." I remember pulling the phone away from my ear and staring at it. Like the device itself had malfunctioned. I put it back and said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Just for now. It's better this way." I asked better for who. She didn't answer that. I asked if something had happened. She said, "We'll talk soon." And the call ended. She ended it. I stood in my kitchen for a full minute without moving. I called back. Voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. Texted. Nothing. I wasn't panicking yet. I was still in the part where you assume there's a simple explanation. A misunderstanding. A bad day. Something someone said that got twisted. I had a whole list of reasonable explanations built before I even reached for my keys. So I called my dad. He picked up fast. Too fast. Like he had been holding the phone. I said, "Dad, what's going on?" He said, "You spoke to your mother." Not a question. A confirmation. He already knew she had called. Which meant he had been sitting there waiting for me to call him next. Which meant this conversation had been planned. Both of them. Together. Decided in advance. I said, "She told me not to come to the house. What is happening?" He said, "It's just for now." I said, "That's not an answer." He went quiet. Not the quiet of someone thinking. The quiet of someone who had already decided how much they were going to say and was sticking to it. Then he said, "We love you. That hasn't changed." And he hung up. I cannot explain what that sentence does to you when it comes right before a dial tone. It doesn't comfort you. It terrifies you. Because people don't feel the need to remind you they love you unless something is happening that might make you question it. I tried calling back. Nothing. I sat down on my kitchen floor. Not dramatically. I just sat down because standing felt unnecessary. My mind went to the obvious places. Were they sick? Had something happened financially? Had someone said something about me, told them something, made up something? Was this about my life choices, my job, who I spent my time with? I ran through every version of myself that might have caused this and came up empty. I was not a difficult daughter. I was not distant. I called every week. I showed up for birthdays. I had never stolen from them, never embarrassed them, never put them in a position they had to defend. And yet here I was, sitting on my kitchen floor, uninvited. I texted my sister that night. Short message. Just, "Have you spoken to Mom and Dad?" She read it immediately. She didn't reply until the next morning. And when she did, it was 4 words that made everything worse. "Don't push this yet." My sister's text sat on my screen for a long time. "Don't push this yet." Not, "I don't know what's going on." Not, "I'm sure it's nothing." She knew something. She had known something long enough to have an opinion about my timing. I called her. She let it ring out. I called again. Same thing. So I texted back, "What does that mean?" She sent a single word. "Later." Then her status went offline and stayed there. I had a sister who wouldn't pick up, 2 parents who had gone silent, and a forward text that confirmed this wasn't a misunderstanding. I went to work the next day because I didn't know what else to do. I work in an office. Open plan. 30 people. I sat at my desk and answered emails and joined a 11 o'clock meeting, and nobody around me had any idea that my entire family had quietly closed a door in my face 24 hours earlier. That's the strange thing about this kind of situation. Life keeps its normal shape on the outside while everything underneath it shifts. By Wednesday I had called my parents 6 more times combined. Nothing. I started going back through recent months looking for the thing I had missed. Last Christmas. Fine. My dad's birthday in March. I had driven 3 hours to be there. We had dinner, it was good. A family group chat that had gone quiet in recent weeks, but that wasn't unusual. No blowout. No cold shoulders at the table. No moment where someone looked at me differently. Nothing that explained a Tuesday phone call telling me to stay away. On Thursday my aunt messaged me. My mom's older sister. She lives 40 minutes from my parents. "We are close in the way that you are close to someone you see 4 times a year but genuinely love." Her message said, "Hi love, hope you're well, fancy a catch-up soon?" Completely normal. Warm. Casual. But the timing was too precise. My parents go silent on Tuesday. My sister shuts down on Tuesday night. And by Thursday my aunt is reaching out unprompted for a catch-up. These things were connected. I didn't know how yet, but I felt it immediately. I wrote back and said yes. Suggested the weekend. She confirmed within minutes. No back and forth. Just, "Perfect, I'll come to you." He had never come to me before. We always met in the middle or I went to her side of town. Small detail. But I noticed it. Friday came and my sister finally called. I picked up before the first ring finished. She said, "I can't tell you much." I said, "Tell me something." She exhaled. Long and slow. Then she said, "Mom and Dad are dealing with something. It started before they called you. You finding out was always going to happen, but they wanted to control when." I said, "Control when I found out about what?" She said, "I can't say." I asked if someone was sick. She said, "It's not that." I asked if it was money. He paused too long on that one. Long enough to make me think it was connected even if it wasn't the whole picture. Then she said, "It's not just money." Not just money. So there was money involved. And something else on top of it. I asked her why I specifically couldn't come to the house. Out of everything, why was my physical presence at that address the thing they needed to prevent? She went quiet again. Then she said, "Because of what's in it." The call ended 30 seconds later. I stood in my hallway with the phone in my hand and one question I could not shake. What was inside my parents' house that they didn't want me to see? What's in it? Those 3 words did something to the rest of my weekend. Every time I tried to think about something else, they pulled me back. Not what's happening. Not what's going on. What's in it? Like the house itself was holding something. Like the building had become the secret. I drove past their street on Saturday. I didn't stop. I just drove past slowly. The house looked exactly the same. Curtains drawn on the front window, which was normal for that time of morning. Both cars in the driveway. No skips outside. No signs of work being done. No visible reason for any of this. I kept driving. My aunt came Sunday afternoon. She brought pastries she had picked up on the way and we sat at my kitchen table and she asked about my job and I answered and we did 10 minutes of completely normal conversation. I waited. She was building to something. I could feel it in the way she kept refilling her cup without drinking from it. Eventually I said, "Have you spoken to my mum recently?" She stopped mid-pour. Set the pot down carefully. Then she looked at me and said, "She mentioned you two had a bit of a situation." A bit of a situation. I told her it wasn't a situation. I told her my mum had called me out of nowhere and told me not to come to the house. That my dad backed it up. That my sister knew something and wouldn't say what. I watched my aunt's face while I said all of this. She was working hard to keep it neutral. When I finished she said, "I think they're trying to protect you." I asked from what. He picked up her cup. Took a long sip. Then said, "That's really something they need to tell you themselves." 2 weeks of silence, and now 2 people in 1 week telling me things that confirmed something real was happening while refusing to tell me what it was. The circle was getting tighter, but nobody was letting me inside it. Monday I went back to work. Tuesday passed. I sent my mom a text that just said, "I'm not angry. I just need to know you're okay." She read it within minutes. No reply. That hurt more than the silence. Wednesday morning something shifted. I woke up and the confusion I had been carrying turned into something harder. Not anger exactly. More like clarity. Something was happening in that house. Something that involved me enough that my presence needed to be prevented. And every person who knew what it was had decided I wasn't ready to hear it. I stopped waiting for someone to come to me. I called a woman named Diane. She lives 2 doors down from my parents. She has lived there for 14 years. She is the kind of neighbor who notices everything and forgets nothing. My mom and her have coffee twice a month. I had her number from years ago when I needed someone to check on the house while my parents were away. She picked up on the second ring. I said, "Diane, it's me. Have you seen my parents lately?" Pause. Short but loaded. She said, "I have, yes." I said, "Are they okay?" She said, "Physically, yes." The word physically doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. I asked if she knew why they might not want me coming by. Another pause. Longer this time. Then she said, "I think you need to come and see me in person." Not a phone conversation then. Something she wouldn't say out loud without being able to see my face first. I said I could be there by Friday. She said, "Come Thursday. And don't tell your parents." I didn't tell anyone I was going. Not my sister. Not my aunt. Nobody. I drove Thursday morning. 2.5 hours. I stopped once for petrol and coffee and got back on the road. The whole drive I kept running Diane's voice back in my head. The way she said physically. The way she agreed to talk but not over the phone. The way she said don't tell your parents like that was a serious instruction and not a casual suggestion. I parked 1 street over. Walked to her door. She opened it before I knocked. She had been watching for me. She was dressed like she was going somewhere. Hair done. Shoes on. But she brought me straight inside and closed the door behind me and didn't offer me anything. No tea. No small talk. Which told me she had been rehearsing this. Deciding what to say and how fast to say it. We sat down. She had a manila folder on the coffee table. She didn't touch it immediately. She said, "How much has your family told you?" I said, "Nothing. That's why I'm here." She nodded like that confirmed something she had already suspected. Then she said, "Your parents have been under a lot of pressure. It started about 4 months ago." 4 months. While I was calling every week and laughing about television and coffee makers. 4 months of something building that I was completely outside of. I asked what kind of pressure. She said, "Financial first. Then it got more complicated." There was that word again. Complicated. Everyone kept landing on it. Like the actual noun was too heavy to carry into a sentence. She said my father had made a decision. A significant one. About the house. She didn't know the full detail, but she knew it involved paperwork. Legal paperwork. And she knew my name had come up in conversations she had overheard. Not snooping. Just proximity. Thin walls and a shared driveway and 2 people who sometimes forgot to close the kitchen window when they argued. I asked what she heard. She looked at her hands for a moment. Then she said, "Your mother said your name twice in one argument. Once very quietly. Once not quietly at all." She paused. The second time she was crying. My mother had been crying about me. About something connected to me. While simultaneously refusing to speak to me. I looked at the folder on the table. She noticed. She put her hand on it but didn't open it. She said, "A solicitor came to the house 6 weeks ago. I saw him arrive. Smart car, briefcase, stayed about 90 minutes. A week later another man came. Different energy. He wasn't a solicitor." She stopped. I said, "What was he?" She said, "I don't know exactly. But I wrote down his number plate." She opened the folder. Inside was a single piece of paper with a handwritten registration number and below it, a printed page. She had looked it up. The plate was registered to a company. A financial recovery firm. Debt collectors. Not letters through the door. Not phone calls. A physical representative at my parents' house. I stared at the paper. Diane said, "There's something else." She reached further into the folder and pulled out a photograph. Printed from her phone. Taken from her upstairs window. It showed my parents' front door. Standing on the step was a man I didn't recognize. And beside him, partially turned away from the camera, was someone I did. My brother. My brother who lived 4 hours away. My brother who had not mentioned a single visit to our parents in any conversation we had shared in recent months. He had been there. Secretly. While I was being kept away. I looked up at Diane. She said, "That was taken 3 weeks ago." I sat with that photograph for a long time. My brother's face. Half turned. Standing at my parents' door next to a man from a financial recovery firm. 3 weeks ago. While my calls were going to voicemail and my texts were sitting on read. I thanked Diane. She walked me to the door and gripped my arm before I left. She said, "Be careful how you do this." I nodded. I walked back to my car on the next street and sat inside it without starting the engine. My brother's name is Paul. We are not close in the way some siblings are, but we are not distant either. Christmas, birthdays, occasional calls. He had a habit of going quiet for weeks at a time and nobody questioned it because that was just Paul. Turns out that habit had been very convenient recently. I called him from the car. It rang 7 times and went to voicemail. I didn't leave one. I texted instead. Just, "I know you've been to Mom and Dad's. Call me." Delivered. Not read. His read receipts were on. He had them on for years. Which meant he saw the notification, chose not to open it, and left it sitting there unread so he could claim later he hadn't seen it. I started the engine. I had parked 1 street over from my parents specifically to avoid them seeing my car. I was already here. 2.5 hours of driving. Diane's folder sitting in my passenger seat. A photograph of my brother and a debt collector on my parents' doorstep. I was not going home without answers. I turned the car around and drove the 1 street over and pulled up directly outside their house. Both cars still in the driveway. Curtains open now. Someone was home and awake and moving around in there. I walked up the path and knocked. Nothing. I knocked again. Harder. I could hear the television inside. It went quiet. Someone had turned it down. They heard me knock and they turned the television down and then didn't come to the door. I said through the door, "I know you're in there. I'm not leaving." Silence. I stepped back and looked up at the house. The upstairs curtain on my dad's side moved. Just slightly. Someone checking from above rather than answering below. I stood on that path for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the time. I knocked 3 more times. I stayed calm. I didn't shout again after the first time. I just stood there and made my presence a fact they couldn't ignore by waiting long enough. On minute 12 the door opened. My dad. He looked older than the last time I had seen him. Not sick older. Tired older. The kind of tired that comes from carrying something heavy for too long. He was in his day clothes but his eyes were red at the edges. He said, "You shouldn't be here." I said, "Let me in." He said, "This isn't the right time." I held up Diane's photograph. Printed page facing him. My brother. The man with the briefcase. His own front door. He stared at it. Something moved across his face that wasn't quite guilt and wasn't quite fear. Something between the two. He stepped back from the door. Not an invitation exactly. More like a surrender. I walked in. The house smelled the same. Looked the same. Nothing visibly dramatic. No boxes. No obvious disorder. Just a house that felt like it was holding its breath. My mum was in the kitchen doorway. He had known I was outside the whole time too. She looked at me and the first thing she said was not hello. She said, "How much did Diane tell you?" That question told me everything about where I stood. Not how did you find out? Not why are you here? Straight to Diane. Which meant Diane was already a known variable in whatever they were managing. They had factored in the possibility that she might talk. They just hadn't expected it to happen this fast. I said, "Enough." My mum stepped back into the kitchen. My dad closed the front door behind me and stood with his hand still on it like he might need to open it again quickly. The house was quiet in a way that felt deliberate. No television now. No radio. Just the 3 of us and whatever was about to happen next. I followed my mum into the kitchen. She was standing at the counter with her back to me. Kettle on. Hands flat on the surface. I recognized that posture. She used it when she was buying herself time to think. I sat down at the kitchen table. I put Diane's folder on it. My dad came in and stood near the door. Not sitting. Standing. Like he hadn't decided yet whether this conversation was happening. I said, there was a solicitor here 6 weeks ago. And a man from a debt recovery company. And Paul has been here at least once without telling me. I want to know what is going on in this house. My mom turned around. She looked at the folder. Then at me. Then past me at my dad. Some silent exchange happening that I wasn't part of. She said, we didn't want you involved. I said, in what? She pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. Fully. Like her joints hurt. She was 61 years old, and in that moment she looked it in a way she usually didn't. She said, your father borrowed money. I looked at my dad. He was looking at the floor. He said, 3 years ago. We had some problems. The roof. Then the boiler. Then his hours got cut at work and we were short for a few months, and rather than tell anyone he sorted it himself. She said, sorted it himself the way you say a phrase you've rehearsed enough times that the feeling has worn off it. I said, borrowed from where? She said, a private lender. Not a bank. Not a credit union. A private lender. Which explained the recovery firm. Banks send letters. Private lenders send people. I asked how much. She told me. The number was large enough that I didn't respond immediately. I just sat with it. 3 years of interest on top of the original amount. Missed payments. Penalties. The number had grown in the dark while everyone pretended everything was fine. I said, why couldn't I know this? She looked at her hands. Then she said, because of what your father did to try and fix it. There was the second layer. Not just debt. What he did to try and fix the debt. I looked at my dad again. He still hadn't sat down. Still hadn't looked up from the floor. I said, Dad. He finally looked at me. And there was something in his expression that was past embarrassment. Past guilt. Something that looked like a man who had been waiting for this moment for months and was exhausted by the waiting. He said, I put the house up. 4 words. I said, what do you mean you put the house up? He said, as collateral. Against the loan. 18 months ago. I heard it. I understood each individual word. But the sentence took a moment to fully land. The house. This house. The one I was sitting in. Was not fully theirs anymore. Nobody spoke for almost a full minute. My mom was looking at the table. My dad was looking at me. I was looking at nothing in particular while my brain quietly rearranged everything I thought I understood about my parents' life. They owned this house outright. That was always the fact. Paid off years ago. No mortgage. Their security. The thing my dad mentioned anytime anyone talked about money troubles. We own the house. Said with a quiet pride that I had heard my entire life. Except they didn't. Not anymore. Not fully. I said, how long have you known it might go? My mum said, 6 months. 6 months of Sunday phone calls and normal conversations and not a single word. I said, and Paul knows. My dad nodded once. I said, why Paul and not me? My mum looked up then. She said, Paul found out by accident. He came to visit unannounced back in January and your father had paperwork on the table. She paused. We didn't choose him over you. He just walked in at the wrong moment. Or the right one. Depending on how you looked at it. I opened Diane's folder and pushed the printed page across the table. The registration number. The financial recovery firm. My dad looked at it and nodded like a man confirming something he already knew was coming. He said, they've been here twice. The second time they left a document. I said, show me. Another look between them. My mum got up. She went to the drawer beside the fridge. The one that had always held takeaway menus and spare batteries and things without a proper home. She pulled out an envelope and brought it to the table and placed it in front of me without opening it. I opened it myself. Several pages. Dense language. Legal formatting. I am not a solicitor, but I have signed enough contracts in my life to read the shape of a document even when the detail is technical. I read it slowly. My parents sat quietly and let me. It was a formal notice. A timeline. The lender had activated a clause in the original agreement. Because of missed and partial payments over 14 months, the collateral. This house, this address, was now subject to recovery proceedings. There was a date on the final page. 11 weeks from now. 11 weeks and this house could legally begin the process of being taken. I put the document down. I said, has a solicitor looked at this? My dad said, yes. the one Diane saw come. He said our options are limited. We either clear the outstanding amount or we enter a repayment agreement they'll likely reject given the history or... He stopped. I said, or what? He said, or we look at other assets. I said, what other assets? He didn't answer immediately. My mum stood up and went back to the counter. Kettle again. Back turned again. My dad reached into the same drawer she had gone to. Further back than she had reached. He pulled out a second envelope. Smaller. He placed it on top of the first. He said, this is what we didn't want you to find out about yet. I picked it up. Inside was a single folded page. Not legal formatting this time. A letter. Handwritten at the top with a firm's letterhead printed below. I unfolded it. My name was in the second paragraph. Not as a recipient. Not as someone being informed. As a named party in a proposed financial arrangement. My parents had put something in my name. Or were planning to. Without asking me. Without telling me. I looked up from the page. My dad said, we were going to tell you. I said, when? He said nothing. I put the letter down flat on the table. My name. In a financial document. Arranged without my knowledge. By the two people who raised me and then stopped answering my calls. I said, what exactly is in my name? My dad sat down finally. Like the standing had been the last thing holding him together and he had run out of it. He pulled the letter back toward him and looked at it even though he clearly already knew every word on it. He said, we spoke to a financial advisor. Someone Paul found. The advisor suggested that if the house was transferred, partially, into a family member's name it could complicate the recovery proceedings. Create a legal delay. He paused. Buy us time. I said, you were going to transfer the house into my name. He said, a portion. Enough to trigger a dispute on ownership. I said, without telling me. He said, we were going to tell you. I said, when Dad? When exactly was that going to happen? He didn't answer. I stood up. Not dramatically. I just couldn't sit anymore. I walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the back garden. Same garden. Same fence panel that had been loose for 3 years. Same rose bush my mum refused to cut back. Everything the same and nothing the same. I turned around. I said, so that's why I couldn't come to the house. Because if I came here and saw the paperwork or ran into the wrong person at the wrong moment I would find out what you were planning before you were ready to tell me. My mum said quietly, we needed more time to work out the details. I said, the details of using my name on a legal document without my consent. She flinched. Small but visible. I said, do you understand what that could do to me? If this goes wrong. If a court looks at this and decides it was fraudulent transfer. That's not your problem anymore. That becomes mine. My dad said, the advisor said. I said, I don't care what the advisor said. I care that my name was going into something life-altering and your plan was to tell me when it was already done. The kitchen went very quiet. My mum turned around from the counter. She wasn't doing anything at the counter. She hadn't been doing anything at the counter. She had just needed somewhere to put her face that wasn't directly at me. She said, we panicked. I said, for 6 months. She said, yes. For 6 months. I looked at my dad. He had his hands on the table in front of him. Pressed flat. Like he was studying something. I said, does Paul know about the transfer plan? Putting it in my name. My dad's jaw moved before the words came. He said, it was Paul's suggestion. I heard that sentence and I felt something very cold move through me that had nothing to do with the temperature in the room. Paul, my brother, who arrived at the wrong moment in January, who had been coming to this house quietly ever since, who hadn't returned my call or opened my text, whose idea it was to put my name on a document that could legally implicate me in a disputed asset transfer. I said, why me? Why not Paul? My dad looked at my mum. She looked back at him. Then he said the thing I had not prepared for. He said, because Paul is already named on the loan. I sat back down. My brother wasn't just a bystander who stumbled onto this in January. My brother was in the original debt. 3 years ago. At the beginning of all of this. Paul was already in it. I needed a moment. I got up and walked out of the kitchen into the hallway. Not leaving. Just stepping outside the room where the air felt thinner. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and looked at the photographs on the wall. The same ones that had been there for years. Holidays. Graduations. Christmases. All four of us at various ages grinning at various cameras. Paul in every single one. I went back into the kitchen. I said, "Start from the beginning. The actual beginning." My dad looked at my mum. She nodded once. Permission granted or burden shared. I couldn't tell which. He said, 3 years ago Paul had a problem. A serious one. He had debts from a business that didn't work. Not small debts. The kind that follow you. He stopped. Reorganized. Then continued. He came to us. We didn't have the liquid money to help him outright, so your father. My mum cut in. She said, "We borrowed against the house. Privately. To clear Paul's debt." I sat very still. They hadn't borrowed money because of a roof or a boiler. They had borrowed money to save my brother. Everything they had told me 30 minutes ago. The story about the repairs and the short months and the cut hours. Constructed. Carefully enough to sound true but built specifically to keep Paul's name out of it. I said, "The roof. The boiler." My mum said, "Those things did happen. Just not in that order. And not why." I said, "So you lied to me?" She said, "We protected him." I said, "From me?" She didn't answer that directly. She said, "Paul was in a very bad place. The business failure broke something in him. We were frightened for him. We did what we thought we had to do." I understood that. The part of me that loved my brother understood every word of it. And underneath that part was something harder that understood something else entirely. They had put their house on the line for Paul. And now that the house was at risk, they had designed a solution that put my name on the line for Paul. Without asking me. Without telling me. Without giving me the choice they never gave themselves either. I said, "Does Paul feel any responsibility for what's happening now?" My dad said, "He's trying to help." I said, "By suggesting you use my name." Silence. I said, "Where is he in all of this financially?" "Right now." My mum said, "He's stable now. The business is gone but he's working. He doesn't have the kind of money that fixes this." I said, "But I do." Neither of them spoke. And there was the real geometry of the situation finally visible. Paul caused the debt. My parents absorbed it. The debt grew. Paul stabilized and moved on with his life 4 hours away while this house quietly accumulated a crisis. And when the crisis reached its peak, somebody looked around for the next available resource and landed on me. Not because I was the obvious choice. Because I was the only one left who didn't already know. I said, "How much would clear it?" My dad told me. It was significant. Not impossible for me. But significant. And they knew that. They knew my situation. They had a reasonable picture of what I had and what I could access. I said, "And if I cleared it? What happens to my name on that document?" My dad said, "It wouldn't be needed anymore." So the plan had 2 versions. Use my name as a legal shield if the money couldn't be found. Or ask me for the money directly if I found out before the shield was in place. Either way, the answer was always going to be me. I picked up my bag from the kitchen floor. My mum said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I need air." I walked out the front door and down the path and stood on the pavement outside. The street was completely ordinary. A woman walking a dog. A car reversing out of a driveway 3 houses down. The kind of afternoon that had no idea what was happening inside that house. Call Paul. This time he picked up. Second ring. I said, "I'm at Mum and Dad's." Pause. Then, "Okay." Just okay. Not surprised. Not panicked. Like he had been waiting for this call to come and had already decided how to receive it. I said, "I know about the loan. I know about your business. I know it was your debt they borrowed against the house to clear. And I know whose name you suggested they use when the house started going." Silence. I said, "Say something, Paul." He said, "I was going to call you." I said, "When?" He said, "When we had a plan." I said, "You had a plan. It had my name in it. That was the plan." He said, "It was just to buy time. The advisor said." I said, "I've heard what the advisor said." He went quiet again. I could hear him breathing. Slow and deliberate, like a man choosing his next words very carefully. He said, "I know how this looks." I said, "Tell me how it looks to you. Because I want to hear your version." He said, "I made a mistake 3 years ago. Mum and Dad helped me. I didn't ask them to do it the way they did it. I asked for help and they made a decision I didn't fully know about until later. He paused. And then it went wrong and I've been trying to fix it. I said, by volunteering my name. He said, by finding options. The advisor gave us 3. That was one of them. I said, did any of the other options involve your name? The pause that followed was long enough to answer the question without words. I said, right. He said, my name is already on the original loan. Putting it on anything else creates more exposure. The advisor said it would make things worse. Technically possibly true. Conveniently absolutely true. I said, you've been going to that house for months. Quietly. While I was being kept away. You sat in those meetings with the solicitor and the recovery firm and you helped them build a solution, and at no point did you pick up the phone and say, someone should tell her. He said, they weren't ready. I said, you weren't ready. Don't put that on them. He didn't argue that. Which told me I was right. I stood on that pavement for 20 more minutes going back and forth with him. He wasn't cruel about any of it. He wasn't cold. He sounded genuinely worn down by the whole thing. And some part of me registered that he had been carrying this for 3 years. The guilt of what his failure had cost our parents. The weight of watching the house slowly move toward the edge. But carrying guilt and doing the right thing are not the same activity. I ended the call and went back inside. My parents were still at the kitchen table. Neither of them had moved. 2 cups of tea sat untouched, going cold between them. I sat back down. I said, I'm not signing anything. I'm not putting my name on a document I wasn't consulted on. That's not happening. My mum nodded. Like she had expected it. My dad said, we understand. Then he said, but we're going to lose the house. And for the first time since I walked through the door, he cried. I had never seen my dad cry before. Not at funerals. Not when his own father died. Not once in 33 years of being his daughter. He was the kind of man who expressed difficulty through silence and practical action. Crying was not in his register. He cried now. Quietly. Hands still flat on the table. No drama in it. Just water running down the face of a man who had run out of other options. My mum put her hand over his. She didn't look at me. I sat there and watched my parents in a way I had never had to watch them before. Not as my parents. Just as 2 people who had made a series of decisions out of love and fear and had ended up here. In this kitchen. With a deadline 11 weeks away and a daughter they had kept in the dark finally sitting across from them knowing everything. I drove home that evening without a resolution. No agreement. No plan. No dramatic declaration in either direction. I said I needed time to think and they both nodded, and my mum walked me to the door and held my arm for a moment before I left. She didn't say sorry. I noticed that. She said, thank you for coming. Like I had done them a favor by forcing my way into their house after weeks of silence. I thought about that on the drive home. The first week after that visit was the strangest. I knew everything now, and somehow that was harder than knowing nothing. When I knew nothing I could be angry at a mystery. Now I had to be angry at specifics. At choices with faces on them. I called Paul twice that week. He answered both times. The conversations were short and careful, like 2 people navigating a floor they weren't sure would hold. He said he was looking at refinancing options. I didn't ask for details. I wasn't ready to problem solve with him yet. My aunt called midweek. She knew more than she had let on at my kitchen table. I didn't challenge her on it. I just listened to her talk around the edges of everything and said very little. By the following weekend something had shifted in me that I hadn't expected. Not forgiveness exactly. Too early for that. More like a reluctant separation of the people from the decisions. My parents had lied to me. They had planned to use my name without asking. Those were facts and they didn't soften. But underneath them were 2 people who had spent 3 years quietly drowning to protect a son who had already stopped drowning himself. That asymmetry sat uncomfortably in me. I called a financial advisor of my own. Not Paul's. I laid out the situation without emotion and asked for an honest picture of my options. She asked questions. I answered them. She said she would come back to me in a few days. She called back on a Thursday. What she said changed the shape of the problem. Not eliminated it, but changed it. There was a route. Not the one Paul's advisor had suggested. No legal maneuvering. No name on a document without consent. A cleaner option. It would cost me. Significantly. It would take a substantial portion of what I had spent years quietly building for myself. But it was clean. Mine to choose or not choose without anyone arranging it behind my back. I sat with that for 4 more days. Then my parents called. Together. Both of them on the phone at the same time, which they had never done before in my life. My mum said, "We want you to come home." I stood at my window for a long time after that call ended. 11 weeks had become 6. And I still didn't know what I was going to do. I drove over on a Saturday morning. No announcement. No prepared speech. I just got in the car and drove and let the decision exist in the action rather than in my head where it had been living rent-free for 6 weeks. I parked directly outside this time. Walked straight up the path. Knocked once. My mum opened the door almost immediately. She had heard the car. She was wearing her good cardigan. The one she saved for occasions. Which meant she had been expecting me even without a call. Which meant she knew me well enough to know I would come when I was ready and had been watching for me anyway. She stepped aside. I walked in. My dad was in the living room. He stood up when I came in, which he never normally did. Paul was on the sofa. I stopped. Nobody had told me Paul would be there. He looked at me. I looked at him. He said, "I drove down this morning. I wanted to be here." I held his gaze for a moment and then I sat down in the armchair across from him, and my parents sat together on the other sofa, and the 4 of us were in a room together for the first time in what felt like a year, though it had only been months. My mum offered tea. I said yes. She left the room and the 3 of us sat in the particular silence of people who have said the difficult things and haven't yet figured out what comes after them. Paul said, "I'm sorry." No preamble. No qualification. Just that. I nodded once and left it there for now. Not accepted. Not rejected. Received. My mum came back with 4 cups and sat down. I said, "I spoke to a financial advisor." Everyone in the room became very still. I said, "There is an option. It doesn't involve my name on any document relating to the existing debt. It's a private loan. From me. To you. Structured properly through a solicitor with a repayment agreement in writing." I looked at my dad. "It clears the outstanding amount. The house stays yours. You pay me back over time at a rate we agree on together." My dad opened his mouth. Closed it. My mum said, "We can't ask you to do that." I said, "You didn't ask. I decided." The room stayed quiet for a moment. Then my dad said, "Why?" Not gratefully. Genuinely. Like he actually needed to understand the reason. I said, "Because it's the right thing, and because I can, and because watching you lose this house over a decision you made out of love is not something I'm willing to do if I have a way to stop it." I paused. "But I need something from all 3 of you in return." They waited. I said, "No more decisions that involve me made without me. Not financial ones. Not legal ones. Not ones where my name or my money or my future is anywhere in the conversation. If it touches me, I am in the room from the beginning. That's the condition." My mum said yes immediately. My dad nodded. Slowly but fully. Paul said, "Yes." Then he said, "I mean it." I looked at him for a long moment. 3 years of a secret that cost everyone in this room something. A brother who let our parents absorb damage that originated with him. A family that handled crisis by building walls instead of opening doors. All of that was still true. And I was still sitting here. Not because everything was resolved. Not because the hurt had finished. But because some things matter more than being right, in this house and these people were mine regardless of what had happened inside both. I picked up my tea. My mum exhaled like she had been holding her breath for months. Maybe she had.